The Flash from Warner Brothers DC and Elemental from Disney Pixar, two movies that opened this past weekend, each with budgets at or north of $200 million. And these movies combined are set to lose about $500 million at the box office, but for very different reasons. It seems The Flash's problem was quite simply Ezra Miller, but Pixar's problem with Elemental is a bit more complex, as the studio doesn't seem to know who it's making movies for anymore, at least according to its president. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Now, the three key components for this video are simple. Where are these movies after 4 days in the box office, including the Juneteenth holiday Monday? Why are these movies underperforming so badly? And then finally, is there any hope going forward, and what could the final results of these box office tallies be once these movies, The Flash and Elemental, conclude their runs? Let's start here with The Flash. Fresh news on this one. We've got the Monday numbers in. The domestic box office ramped up about $6 million. And that's a $61 million total haul for this movie domestically after 4 days. And I want to remind everybody that the initial estimates had this movie coming in over $70 million in just the first 3 days, and even that was bad. The international box office didn't really help it all that much, and the scores for this movie going forward, that is the audience reactions, the exit polling to this, suggest that it's not going to get a whole lot better. In the case of Elemental from Disney Pixar, we do not have the Monday figures tallied into that domestic box office, although reports are coming out from places like Exhibitor Relations suggesting that it too had about a $6 million Monday, about the same as Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse did as well. So that would put this domestic box office somewhere in the range of about 34 to 36 million at this point. The international box office for Elemental, however, is of course a disaster. It's not playing well anywhere. Now, the audience reactions to this seemingly were more positive than those of The Flash, and it could leg out a little bit better, but we'll talk about the ultimate numbers for this because they are very, very bad. Disney and Warner Brothers are looking at tremendous financial losses on these two movies. We're going to get to the projections going forward for these films in the final segment of this video, but let's talk about why these two movies opened so poorly to begin with. Let's start with this one from The Hollywood Reporter. Ezra Miller's Flash and Pixar's Elemental get iced by moviegoers. Elemental marks Pixar's worst opening since Toy Story nearly 3 decades ago. Are we seriously trying to compare the opening of a movie in 2023 to the unadjusted box office of a film from 30 years ago? That's a cope, if I've ever seen one. You gotta be kidding me. But The Flash was snubbed. Starring Ezra Miller in the titular role, Warner Brothers and DC's The Flash is anything but flashy in the opinion of moviegoers, and the film earned an estimated $55.7 million for the 3 days and projected $64.2 million for the 4 days, notably behind expectations. Now, I have a feeling that those numbers, that $64 million, is probably going to come in even a little bit lower. That means at the end of the day, the 4-day tally for The Flash is going to be even less than the initial 3-day estimates. Matter of fact, The Flash had hoped for a 3-day start of at least $70 million so as to come in ahead of such disappointing DC titles as Black Adam. Now, that's a fair comparison because that just happened in the last 6 to 8 months. That collected $67 million in its first 3 days. So yes, The Flash is underperforming even Black Adam. Overseas, it only opened to $72 million, and I say only, again, because for a film that had a final tally of its production costs somewhere in the realm of $300 million, not the $200 million production budget that was initially slated years ago when this movie was greenlit, but what they spent after massive reshoots and massive redos of VFX and CGI, which still turned out terrible. No, this movie came in closer to $300 million, and that was before they spent a dime to market this thing. The studio's leadership has been hyping The Flash for months, with Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav proclaiming it as the greatest superhero movie he's ever seen. Now, there's been a lot of complaints out there about David Zaslav and even James Gunn coming out to rah-rah and cheerlead for this movie, saying that it's the greatest thing they've ever seen. Now, again, that didn't turn out to be the case, and I think everybody knows that at this point, but let's not blame these two that much. They came in long after this movie was well underway. They basically took it over when David Zaslav came to play after AT&T spun Warner Brothers out in May of 2022. And at this point, I can't blame David Zaslav for trying to put his best foot forward. Same thing with James Gunn. That's called doing your job. While superhero fare often skews heavily male, The Flash is even more so than usual, or 70%. Box office pundits are divided as to whether Ezra Miller's off-screen woes were impacting the film's performance. Yeah, let's go ahead and lay that debate to rest. They absolutely impacted it. And even if everybody didn't know every single detail of what had gone on, Ezra Miller isn't exactly the type of person that you want to have as a superhero role. Hell, he's not even the type of person that you want to have on screen at all. I remember the first time I saw Ezra Miller in anything, and I said, good Lord, I can't take more than 3 minutes of this guy. God forbid he ever gets a movie that he has to carry by himself. Well, hello, Flash, here we are, and that's exactly what happened. He's obnoxious, and quite frankly, the reason that probably the audience skewed 70% male is because the women that usually like to go see superhero movies want to see big, hot, alpha male guys. They want to see the guys like the Chris Hemsworths, not some little soy boy beta male like Ezra Miller. And when you compound that with the fact that he's probably more famous for his off-screen mental health issues than anything he's done in front of a camera, that's not improving the situation either. At the end of the day, the biggest problem for The Flash is Ezra Miller himself. But the article continues into the problems at Disney and Pixar with Elemental. The family film quickly fell flat at the box office in the latest blow for the storied animation studio. Many pundits worry that original animated IP is no longer a theatrical proposition. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I think this is more of a bad movie issue. Same thing with superhero movies. I keep hearing the word superhero fatigue, but I don't think that's it at all. I think it's just simply bad movie fatigue. Most of these movies, if not darn near all of them that have come out since the theaters have reopened in the last couple of years, haven't been that good. And once you hand audiences 2, 3, or 4 films in a row of a certain genre that keep getting progressively worse and worse and worse, they just stop buying tickets. And I think the same could be said for Pixar itself and Walt Disney Animation Studios. And of course, the article brings up something else that we've discussed here, but as time marches on and more movies from competitors like Universal and Sony come out, I'm starting to agree with this less and less, saying that, well, because they put so many Pixar movies straight to Disney+, a total of 3 of them, that is, that now it's changed audience habits. But I seriously doubt that audiences are just zeroing in on Disney and Pixar films and saying, let's go see everything else at the theater, but we'll wait for these to show up on Disney+. I think, if anything, the reason that people might be waiting for these to just show up on Disney Plus is because the movies aren't good enough for them to take their time to go see them in the theaters. And to that end, Variety magazine seems to stumble on something here, or at least something that Pixar's president recently said. From an article on June 19th, after Elemental bombs, can Pixar restore its box office touch? Pixar's chief creative officer, Pete Docter, recently told the press that he doesn't, quote, think of Pixar as making children's programming. Wait, what? By the look of box office returns for the studio's recent animated offerings, it would appear that kids have taken notice and haven't been so inclined to watch those movies in theaters. Oh, I think I found the problem. Over the weekend, Elemental collapsed at the domestic box office and the international one as well, with a $29.5 million opening, by far the worst debut in Pixar's 28-year history. Even forgettable adventures like 2015's The Good Dinosaur at $39 million and 2020 Onward at $39 million, and last year's massive money loser Lightyear, $51 million, managed to fill more seats in their opening weekends. There's a bigger issue for Pixar. It's not just youngsters, but general audiences too, who are rejecting the studio's theatrical movies. At this rate, the $200 million budgeted Elemental is shaping up to be its third consecutive misfire, following Lightyear and Onward. It's a depressing streak for the animation empire that spent decades as the gold standard of family films, and one that has industry analysts wondering, can Pixar restore its former box office glory? Go back and throw in the last few duds from Walt Disney's animation studios. Yeah, Encanto did very well once it got to Disney+, but then again, what does doing well on Disney Plus really mean? Disney Plus loses about $1 billion per fiscal quarter, so it's not making any money there. Now, it sold some soundtracks because of a popular score to the film, but then other films that have come out since Encanto from Disney Animation, things like Strange World, were absolute dumpster fires with no redeeming qualities and basically had no lifespan on Disney Plus, even to try to sell a good PR story to places like Variety, Deadline, and THR. The problem with Pixar is the problem that is at a macro level at the Walt Disney Company, and that is their continuous brand damage. Disney keeps involving themselves in places that they probably shouldn't be as a family and children's entertainment company. They don't seem to know who their audiences are anymore. They're trying to appease small socio-political groups, and in doing so, they're driving off the largesse of their highest-paying, most valuable audiences, at least when it comes to film and television. Sure, the parks for right now are still okay, and of course, people are still watching live sports, and that may become all that Disney has in the next 5 years, because it doesn't seem like their theatrical slate is getting any better anytime soon. And the same goes for Marvel, which used to be the most envied studio in the world for the last decade. Now, that is not the case anymore. If you caught us on the recent Sunday Live show, you saw us talk about this article from Matt Bellany at Puck Magazine. The former Hollywood Reporter editor says, that's the worst-case scenario, that Pixar has lost its magic, and what's more likely, though, is that original animation has simply fallen victim to the trend that has engulfed other movie genres like comedy, adult dramas, and awards plays. They're considered mostly for streaming now. However, he continues with this. But look at the Illumination movies of the so-called post-pandemic era. Sing 2 with $405 million worldwide amid theater shutdowns. Minions: The Rise of Gru at almost $940 million. Super Mario Bros. Movie $1.3 billion and counting. All well done, and congrats to Illumination CEO Chris Meledandri, who may have leapfrogged Marvel's Kevin Feige as the most important creative executive at any Hollywood studio. Whoa, big words from Matt Bellany there. And they're taking notice. Again, Disney is falling behind while Universal on all fronts is really picking up steam. The question at this point is, can Disney ever reclaim the family entertainment throne? It seems unlikely, at least for the next few years. Warner Brothers' problems, again, are a bit more isolated to the movie itself, The Flash. I think they may have a similar problem with Aquaman 2, if for no other reason than the movie itself, once again, has been languishing in reshoots and redos and massive production costs. But Aquaman at least had one thing going for it, and it brought the ladies because of Jason Momoa. Hopefully, Warner Brothers will enjoy that once again for the second entry in the series. So finally, let's talk about where The Flash is going from here for Warner Brothers and DC. Again, a reminder, $61.2 million after 4 days. International box office really no better. And if we click in, we can see the biggest component of that $73 million is from China, which is $13.7 million of that as of right now. And of course, China pays back the lowest rentals to U.S. studios like Disney, like Paramount, and in this case, like Warner Brothers. If we look at these numbers and we consider how bad audience reactions are to this film, and the film also seemed to be incredibly front-loaded, of the $24 million Friday opening, almost $10 million of that came from Thursday previews, including some special screenings that they had on Tuesday and Wednesday at certain select large-scale theaters. On Saturday and Sunday, $15.5 million both days. It basically leveled off. Usually we get a bit of a bump on a Saturday and then a retreat on Sunday, but Sunday was Father's Day. You would think that a superhero movie like this might be something fun to go see for the guys on Father's Day, but nobody cared. And then it crashed from there 60% into a holiday Monday in the middle of summer. This movie is front-loaded. That would suggest that even over the next 45 days or so that this movie may linger in theaters, it might not do much more than it already has done in the first 4 days. It's got about 140 million now. If it gets to 280 million over the next 40 days, I might be a little shocked. That would be roughly a 2x runoff for The Flash. Even if it goes to a 3x runoff, gets it closer to almost $400 million, this movie is still light years away from breaking even. The budget on this thing, once again, reportedly finished up at somewhere close to $300 million. And Warner Brothers, as we detailed in previous videos and live streams, had more of a marketing spend for US and Canadian television advertisements than any of its peer group, even some Disney stuff. Meaning that Warner Brothers really spent a big marketing budget on this film, probably easily north of $150 million, maybe approaching $200 million. We can't be sure, but what has been measured by places like iSpot seems to suggest that's exactly what happened. Now, if this movie is actually lucky enough to get to $400 million in the global box office, that means that somewhere around $200 million of that will make it back to Warner Brothers. Nowhere near enough to cover a $300 million production budget and another $150 to $200 in marketing. That is why The Flash, even in that best case scenario, is still going to lose somewhere between $250 and $300 million. In the scenario that I expect, where this movie probably doesn't even see $300 million, Warner Brothers is looking at over a $300 million loss. And then there's Elemental, which, congratulations, you're performing better than Strange World, but if that's the bar that we want to set now for Disney, may God have mercy on their soul. $44 million at the worldwide box office through the opening 3 days. Let's give it another $5 to $6 million there and call it an even 50 at the worldwide box office through 4 days. That would include the Monday holiday. That's still a terrible start for a film that comes in with a $200 million production budget from Pixar. And even if Disney scaled back the marketing expenses and only spent, say, $70 to $75 million, which would be very low for the Walt Disney Company, this movie is still going to be a long, long ways off. Now, again, the audience scores tend to suggest that maybe this thing could get a little bit better, but with such a low start and with a lot of competition coming in the next couple of weeks, this movie does not have a lot of time to really leg itself out, unless it really surprises. Let's be very generous and say this movie somehow finds its way to a 3x set of legs from its opening weekend. It's possible, although certainly more on the outside chance of happening, considering that nobody really seems to care about this film. That would put the total worldwide box office somewhere between 125, maybe as high as $150 million at that point. That means only $75 million is coming home to Disney. And if they had a $75 million marketing budget, that means the entire $200 million production budget is gone. So looking at the numbers here, it seems incredibly feasible, if not incredibly probable, that these movies combined will suffer losses to the tune of $500 million between the two of them. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and of course, until next time, take care.